Morning sunlight poured through the windows of the Hughes family's modest suburban home in Maplewood, Connecticut, as Charlotte Hughes, 34, hummed softly while preparing her children's lunches. Clad in a faded teal sweater and well-worn jeans, her auburn hair tied back with a simple ribbon, she moved with practiced ease, yet her gentle melody hinted at a depth few would suspect. "Mom, you're doing it again," said her daughter Lily, 12, peering around the counter with a playful grin. Charlotte paused, smoothing her voice back to conversation as she arranged sandwiches. The kitchen bore only a single nod to Charlotte's musical past, a small photograph on the windowsill showing a younger Charlotte, eyes closed, poised at a grand piano under a spotlight. That image came from the day she left behind her studies at the Hawthorne Conservatory of Music, where she had been their most promising soprano. Her husband, Michael Hughes, entered with a kiss, holding 2 steaming mugs. "Mrs. Bradley," he teased, referencing her former stage name, "our music teacher mentioned you again." Charlotte smiled but sighed inwardly. She'd given up those dreams when her father, Bernard, suffered a sudden stroke and her mother had already passed away. With no siblings to help, Charlotte chose family over fame, immersing herself in motherhood and home. Yet sometimes, when the house was still, she'd find herself at the piano bench, remembering the power of her own voice. As she handed the mugs to Michael, her fingers brushed the family heirloom watch on her wrist. In its steady tick, she felt the tug of a life paused, yearning for a melody she had almost forgotten. Late that afternoon, a cream-colored envelope, sealed with the Hawthorne Conservatory insignia, arrived with an air of formality that made Charlotte's heart flutter. She held it in her hands for a moment, the paper heavy with memory. By the time Michael peered over her shoulder, she'd already recognized the invitation to the conservatory's 25th anniversary gala. "I can't," she whispered, setting the envelope aside. Moments of panic and doubt curled in her stomach. She thought of her quiet life, school drop-offs, evening routines, recitals whispered only to her children. The world beyond Maplewood had faded like a distant song. Michael wrapped an arm around her waist. "You deserve to go," he said gently. "You were extraordinary." Charlotte shook her head. "I didn't graduate. I walked away." He squeezed her hand. "That was your choice. This invitation is theirs, not yours. But maybe it's time you made peace with that chapter." Later, after tucking Lily and her younger brother, Max, into bed, Charlotte found herself in the attic, where an old trunk lay beneath dusty tarps. Inside were her recital programs, annotated sheet music, and a worn practice metronome. She pulled out a faded photograph of her standing center stage, eyes bright, voice soaring. She ran her fingers over a notebook of compositions she'd never performed. A melody she'd jotted one sleepless night in her dorm room resonated in her mind, untouched, yet alive. Tears pricked her eyes as she hummed its contours, rediscovering a part of herself she'd hidden for years. That night, Charlotte drafted her RSVP. Her finger hovered over accept, trembling with anticipation and fear. Then she clicked send. When she told Michael in the kitchen the next morning, relief and excitement mingled on his face. "I'll pick you up at 6, he promised. "You'll wear that dress I bought you for our anniversary." Charlotte smiled, a weight lifting from her chest. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to step back into the light, and let her true voice be heard once more. The following evening, Charlotte arrived at the grand marble steps of the conservatory's gala venue wearing a simple sapphire sheath dress and understated earrings, gifts from Michael that spoke of his steadfast support. As she ascended, her pulse quickened. She paused at the top, gathering courage. Laughter and music drifted from within. Inside, alumni and patrons mingled beneath glittering chandeliers. Conversations swirled around her, tales of operatic triumphs, recent tours, and new directorships. Charlotte felt a familiar tingle of what might have been. She spotted her old mentor, Professor Eleanor Sinclair, whose warm smile banished her nerves. Eleanor embraced Charlotte, her eyes brimming with pride. "You look radiant," she whispered. "I never thought I'd see you grace our gala again." Before Charlotte could respond, a hush spread near the stage. Victor Delacroix, once Charlotte's fiercest competitor and now the conservatory's esteemed conductor, had entered. His reputation for exacting standards preceded him. Dressed immaculately, he moved with commanding presence. Victor's gaze swept the crowd, settling on Charlotte. He offered a polite nod, but his lips curved in a knowing half-smile. Nearby guests leaned in, whispering, "Isn't that the soprano who left at her peak?" Charlotte squared her shoulders, recalling the choice that had defined her life. A program coordinator approached, inviting her to take a front-row seat for the gala's opening remarks. She complied, seating herself and clutching her invitation like a talisman. As Victor took the podium, he spoke eloquently of sacrifice and success. Then, with a subtle glance at Charlotte, he extended an invitation, "Miss Hughes, your voice once captivated our halls. Would you honor us with a performance tonight?" Polite applause rippled, but Charlotte sensed the undercurrent, a test, a challenge to justify her departure. She stood, heart racing, and walked to the piano unassisted. The conservatory's resident accompanist, Jonathan Reed, offered a warm smile before settling at the keys. Silence fell as Charlotte raised her chin and inhaled deeply. Yet in that moment, memories softened her fear, Lily's wide-eyed admiration, Max's laughter at her nursery rhymes, Michael's unwavering faith. She felt the music pulse within her once more. The first notes of "Come, Gentle Night" brushed the air like a velvet ribbon. Jonathan's piano promised gentle support as Charlotte's voice emerged, warm, resonant, and unbound by years away. Each phrase carried emotion wrought from life itself, love, regret, and the simple joy of rediscovery. Audible gasps fluttered across the audience. Professor Sinclair's hand flew to her heart, tears glistening in her eyes. Victor Delacroix's smug expression faltered as he realized this was no mere nostalgic token. Charlotte's voice had grown richer, deepened by life's trials. In the front row, alumni exchanged astonished glances. Critics leaned forward, pens poised. The melody rose, each note imbued with clarity and passion. Charlotte's control was impeccable, her dynamic range breathtaking, but it was the emotion beneath, the decades of unspoken longing, that gripped the hall. As she approached the aria's climax, her voice soared with crystalline precision. The chandeliers seemed to tremble in resonance. Then, with a final pianissimo flourish, she released the last note, and held it, letting silence settle like sacred hush. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Professor Sinclair rose, standing ovation rippling through the hall. Guests leapt to their feet, tears streaked down stoic faces. Even Victor's ensemble wavered, some colleagues rising despite his silent protest. Charlotte lowered her gaze, chest heaving, but her smile was serene. She had reclaimed not just her technique, but the voice of her own story. Backstage, Victor Delacroix approached Charlotte, entourage in tow. His tone was measured, respect eclipsing earlier condescension. "Miss Hughes, that was extraordinary. The Met is eager to discuss a debut." Charlotte steadied her breath. "Thank you, Maestro Delacroix. I appreciate the offer, but my life is here, with my family." His brow furrowed. "The world awaits. You could headline seasons across Europe." "I chose a different path," she replied softly. "Music will always be part of me, but not at the cost of everything else I cherish." Outside, a representative from Lyric Arts Management offered a recording contract. A celebrated mezzo-soprano invited Charlotte to a masterclass series. Each proposal glittered with prestige and possibility. Michael, waiting in the wings, gathered her hand. "You're turning them down," he said. Charlotte looked into his eyes. "I'm accepting something more meaningful." She turned to the manager. "Instead, I'd like to teach a scholarship workshop through the conservatory, 2 evenings a month. Sharing my experience with students who stay." The manager blinked, surprised, then nodded enthusiastically. We would be honored. Victor watched quietly, a new respect in his gaze. Sometimes the hardest decisions are those of the heart, he said. Charlotte stepped into Michael's arms. Offers and accolades lay behind her, the next chapter would be written not on grand stages, but in the lives she touched. Weeks later, Charlotte sat at her old piano bench in the attic, the room bathed in afternoon light. She revisited compositions she had abandoned, an unfinished nocturne, a lullaby for Lily, and the ariosa she had performed. Each echoed choices made, and paths taken. Lily and Max climbed the attic stairs, peeking through the doorway. "Play something for us, Mom," Lily urged. Charlotte smiled, positioning her hands. As she played the nocturne's opening bars, Lily hummed alongside, Max tapping a rhythmic beat. The attic filled with familial harmony. No audience, no critics, just the pure joy of creation. That evening, Michael found Charlotte writing lesson plans at the kitchen table, sheet music spread before her. "How's your new workshop shaping up?" he asked. "Wonderful," Charlotte replied. "I'm designing it to help students balance passion with personal choice, so they won't feel trapped." Michael nodded. "Your experience will guide them." She paused over her notes, reflecting. Leaving the conservatory had been painful, but it allowed her to build a life enriched by love and service. The echoes of those earlier choices resonated now as foundations for something new. On a crisp autumn morning, Harmonies for Hope Studio opened its doors in downtown Maplewood. A modest sign painted in teal and gold welcomed students of all ages. Charlotte stood by the reception desk, greeting the first visitors, a shy teenager with dreams of Broadway and an elderly gentleman revisiting childhood piano lessons. Inside, sunlight filtered through tall windows onto keyboards and music stands. Charlotte gave each newcomer her full attention, assessing their aspirations and fears. As the morning unfolded, she found profound satisfaction in guiding novices through scales and arpeggios, sharing anecdotes of her own journey when appropriate. Parents watched as children's eyes lit up at their first confident melody. Adults regained lost confidence as Charlotte encouraged them to embrace imperfection. Her teaching blended technical rigor with empathy, drawing on years of disciplined study tempered by life's imperatives. By midday, local press arrived to interview Charlotte for a feature on the community's cultural revival. She spoke of music as a bridge between past and present, art and life. Her words resonated beyond technical pedagogy, they illuminated music's power to heal and connect. When the studio's door closed for lunch, Charlotte reflected on how far she'd come. The applause of a gala hall had been replaced by the quiet joy in her students' faces, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Months later, Maplewood buzzed with anticipation for the annual Harvest Music Festival. Harmonies for Hope Studio had been invited to perform a showcase. Charlotte watched from backstage as her students warmed up, Lily accompanied on piano, teenagers practiced choral pieces, adults refined solo selections. When the curtain rose, the audience fell silent. Under Charlotte's direction, the ensemble delivered a heartfelt program, folk ballads, short operatic arias, and original compositions penned by Charlotte herself. Each performance bore the imprint of her philosophy, authenticity over perfection, expression over acclaim. After the final note, the crowd erupted into sustained applause. Tears glistened on faces young and old. In that moment, Charlotte realized her legacy would not be defined by missed opportunities on grand stages, but by the voices she nurtured. Later, as dusk settled, Michael embraced her. "Look at what you've created," he said. "A community united by song." Charlotte smiled, eyes shining. "I finally understand that true artistry lives not in solitude under spotlights, but in shared moments of beauty." Under the festival lights, Maplewood streets hummed with melodies, echoes of Charlotte's journey from hidden soprano to mentor, from sacrifice to affirmation. And in every note, her choice resonated: life's greatest performances are those we give to each other.